Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from digital marketing, sales channel strategies, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate sales. Now, here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, CEO of Newer Appliances and retail brand digital strategy agencies. Business owners, do you wish you had someone to create a custom strategic plan to grow your online sales, someone to show you how to execute it with your team? If that's what you're looking for, we can do that for you. To learn more, find me on LinkedIn or email me at luke@retailband.com. In this episode, you're going to hear from Professor Patrick Lynch on how COVID is changing buyer attitudes and shopping habits and the rise of global micro-influencer marketing. Specifically, we're going to talk about his new research on how this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for small and mid-sized brands to permanently grab consumer attention. Dr. Lynch is a professor of analytics and leadership for Industry 4.0 at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, including how technology and analytics impact customer behavior and brands. Previously, he was a research fellow in Accenture's Think Tank, the Institute for Strategic Change, where he pioneered methods for measuring shopper attitudes and behaviors. Currently, he's exploring how COVID is changing buyer attitudes and shopping habits and the rise of global micro-influencer marketing. Dr. Lynch is a finisher of a full Ironman triathlon, Boston Marathon, and Leadville 100 mountain bike race. And he's only been hospitalized once doing those things. Dr. Lynch, thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast.
Luke, well, thank you very much for that introduction. That is true. I'm working on being hospitalized more every day, though, so I always hold out hope.
That's funny. And remind me again, where's Leadville? Is that out by Death Valley, right?
Well, that's actually in Colorado, and what's unique about that race is that it happens I think that the lowest elevation that you're at is something like 12,000 feet, and it ascends almost to 14,000 feet. They do that both as a foot race, but I am a finisher of the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, which was one of the more insane experiences that I've had.
Oh, wow. So there's one, maybe it's a run and it's out by Death Valley, but so this is at high elevation. That's just equally as hard. Well, it's a lot of fun. So I was, just so the audience knows, I was joking with Dr. Lynch that he's done the trifecta. I've done a little bit of each of these, but I just do I've done a sprint triathlon, which is, you're only swimming like half a mile on that thing. And I think the bikes are, maybe 20 miles. It's not nothing close to the full Ironman. So congrats on getting those 3 done.
Well, it was another thing, just a social thing to do with friends. And I have a great reference for any endurance athlete. I really just do it for fun, but it connects you to a great set of people in the community, and actually relevant to our product. Our talk today is great products actually in that whole industry, often from small and medium-sized businesses. So maybe some of what we'll talk about today will be relevant to that audience as well.
Oh yeah, there's people are fanatical about those products, and that's what makes those categories fun. Cool. So for the audience, so by the way, just as a side note, so the audience knows, I heard you speak, Dr. Lynch. I was at a pretty small event, affiliated with the IHA. I forget what the name of that event was, but it was in San Diego, affiliated with the International Housewares Association. And so the audience knows Dr. Lynch gave a talk on influencer marketing, micro-influencer marketing. And it was an awesome talk. We actually do a lot of this already at New Era, but I don't hear many people talking about it, at least not at the level that he did. So from that, I said, wow, I got to get Dr. Lynch on the podcast. And in addition to that, you've done this research on consumer behaviors that have changed during COVID. So those are the things we're going to talk about today. We'll just jump right into it here with the first question, which is, how should brands be approaching influencer marketing? Should they focus on measure ROI, or should they just consider this some sort of unmeasurable branding component of their marketing?
Right. Well, Luke, that's a great question. And, unfortunately, we won't have a simple answer. Influencer marketing, clearly a buzzword, right, for any kind of social media tactic that's been active over the past several years. And, initially starting out where I think brands needed a proof of concept, early adopters sort of testing the waters. But now I think the evidence is pretty clear. The majority of brands are beginning to working now with influencers. There's pretty good evidence that they're able to track some kind of change in their business, whether it's going to be specifically ROI or not. We can probably get into that a little bit more. But I definitely think that we are now seeing influencer marketing as a savvy choice to be among your marketing and promotional mix. And it's more than a fad. It's something that I think fundamentally hits at what makes us human, and that is understanding how others are getting needs met and satisfying or solving problems. And that's what's really enriching or beneficial for brands to really consider some kind of an influencer marketing strategy. I think we need to talk a little bit more about whether ROI is right or not. So maybe we can dig in on that a little bit more on some of the trends there.
Sure. And I guess, well, why don't we jump into this next question and then we can probably circle back on some of these things. So let's talk about platforms. When everybody's thinking of influencer marketing, I'm thinking Instagram and YouTube. I'm guessing those are going to be the main platforms that you have also looked at, but I'd like to hear your opinion on the different platforms and how you see them.
Well, that's another great sort of focus that I think many brand owners, C-suite executives to even just sales and marketing managers are wondering about. The fundamental thing that we need to understand is that we are visual processors. The human brain is able to process an image 60,000 times faster than text. 90% of the information that we're actually processing is coming in visually to our brains. And it's not just so much of the information that's hitting us, but when we are able to conceive of that impression or that image, we're by far more persuaded by whatever the message is. Therefore, I don't align myself with any particular platform. I'm not paid by any particular platform, but I think any kind of platform that is going to take advantage of this innate ability for us as visual animals, visual human beings, that we are probably going to see better results from that. Now, over time, obviously, we've already seen in really a short amount of time in our professional careers, some of these social platforms have come and go. I'll date myself a little bit. I do remember, I remember MySpace. I remember other kinds of dinosaurs, like Vine, for example, that kind of have come and go before anybody really knew how to monetize these things. And so there isn't one simple answer, but I believe that any of the platforms that enable you as, a marketer or a brand owner to take advantage of the visual context for the consumption of that media is going to win out at the end of the day. We're just really set up for that. Our brains are hardwired to process that imagery better. And that's actually how we get persuasiveness. And that ultimately is what we're trying to do with marketers is, show that our products are superior in some way at solving a problem. So without naming any particular one, I think anything with the visual kinds of elements are going to be stronger. And it also offers a lot more opportunities, I think, for omni-channel or cross-platform contacts. And that's really what's going to win out at the end of the day.
Yeah. And in those, and so we can keep going on that line there of visual processors. We're visual processors. Is it a huge advantage to have a human face in the picture? And the reason I ask is if we're working with people and that's normally how they make their Instagram feed and they do a collaboration with their, say one of our wine coolers and, the mom or model is in it or she wants to put her kids in it. I always like those. I think getting that face in there makes it more relatable. It adds scale and things like that, but I think there's something else to it. Is that true? Or does just a beautiful picture in a kitchen without a person in it still have that same effect?
Right. Well, this is an age-old kind of element for marketing research. And you definitely can find situations where different types of imagery are going to work. But in general, the reason why seeing a person and then particular types of people, that would be something like, babies or children, even animals for that matter. It actually, again, is hitting a kind of developmental element. Who is it that you see as you are growing up? Obviously, you are immediately drawn to the people around you, your family, your friends, and you learn to trust them. Similarly with animals, as a adult, if you are ultimately having children, you're paying special attention to them. So we find that the more relevant an image is for a person to either see themselves or see something that is vitally important to them is likely going to be attracting more attention. And there's actually different types of attention. Maybe if it's relevant here, we can go into that. But there's different reasons why those kinds of images really tap a core motivating factor for us to pay attention to something that's important when they're able to see an image of either themselves or a baby. This kind of imagery is actually super important also because there's this notion of what we call compensatory consumption. When we see someone doing something that is important to us, a need or something that is being satisfied, we're immediately drawn to try to sort of compare on, how do we stack up to that need being solved? So take the kitchen, for example. That stain in your own counter doesn't get clean, but boy, you just saw someone cleaning that, they're very satisfied. We immediately sort of relate to that in a very primal way. And this draws our attention to that. So it's difficult to just do that with a before and after pristine counter, although I'm not saying that doesn't work. When you see a person added to that image, it immediately grabs attention in a different way. And in fact, those are some of the new things that I think that people should be measuring rather than ROI. It's going to be other kinds of engagement and types of evidence that the image is working.
Well, you know what? Why don't we stick on that then? So, because we started talking about ROI, so maybe you can just finish your thoughts on that. And before you do, I'll just share a little bit behind the scenes. So, I have some friends that run their influencer programs literally 100% on ROI because it literally runs most of the revenue at their business. And then others that just they'll track it with codes, but it's more part of the marketing umbrella. And then, their business maybe doesn't happen on their website. It could happen on other channels. And so it's very hard to actually understand where that final conversion is happening. So the ROI conversations, and for people listening to this podcast, you're going to find that a lot of them are selling all over the place, right? They can track on their own website, but what if that YouTube viewer, buys it off homedepot.com? They're never going to know. So it would be great to get your thoughts on ROI, and then also, as it relates to the images and what else can be measured.
Great. Well, let's pick up on the ROI. There is absolutely nothing the matter with measuring ROI if you can do it in a way that you're satisfied with. We all know that the challenge, of course, is the attribution. So many different ways, so many different pathways through the funnel, going from awareness all the way to a sale. And you bring up a good example. And if that person did, get sensitized to something, but buy it over at Home Depot, ROI is out the door. So some of the other new thinking that you may want to consider is really just conversion goal. Some percentage of conversions, and the conversion could be defined different ways. Obviously, we want the money if you can actually trace it to ROI. But how about winning new customers? Just the percentage of winning new customers. Obviously, you would expect that to increase in your sales, but it may just be that you just have new eyeballs and new customers, or encouraging more engagement with your existing customers. We're all going after so much of our marketing spend to go and find new customers, where actually it's much more efficient for you to get more out of your existing customers and have them spend more. Or how about actually having a faster pathway to launch a new product or a new service? So speeding up, especially relative to some prior benchmark where you may have had a new product launch or engagement where you invested in a mass marketing campaign, using some of these new influencer techniques could actually expedite your ability to have awareness, uptake, and full conversion to these new product launches or new services. So I'm just giving you some ideas. We could go on. I mean, I don't think that there's any right or wrong answer here, but some businesses are really stymied to try to measure that ROI. And there could be other ways of sort of just understanding brand identity that might be appropriate and really starting to utilize new customers. When I talk with either executives like yourselves or some new clients, I introduce some new ideas like maybe COI, that is cooperative investment. In other words, when you are engaging with an influencer, rather than thinking about it the way that we used to with a marketing campaign that's one and done, how are you actually creating some kind of cooperative relationship with that influencer or set of influencers to actually do things you could not do with your budget? We all know how expensive it is to actually engage with a formal agency to do ad creative. Well, allowing those influencers to actually produce creative on their behalf that's a win-win for your brand and for them. The ROI on that is almost immeasurable, and certainly you probably didn't have the budget to do it the traditional way in the first place, so you would have done it. So there's lots of strategies to use influencers with those kind of campaigns. And so I talk about COI, cooperative investment. In other words, how much am I actually investing in that influencer? But it might be much more broad than literally just a sale, because I'm actually gaining an audience and I'm having much more referrals beyond just the initial contact. So these are some new ways to think about metrics and different ways that you can measure things.
I think those are perfect, actually. And I really like the two things you talked about, which is, utilizing influencers to launch SKUs. We've done that at New Era. It's part of our DNA. And the thing is, you kind of get a bunch of things. Oftentimes, like you mentioned, brands will launch with a bunch of ad spend, but here you're getting oftentimes permanent assets on the internet, on third-party sites that are going to rank forever. And you can, get the other thing I liked is getting the digital assets, like you talked about. So, kind of to that point, what we've done is we created a scorecard. So every company is going to have their needs, Dr. Lynch, but like with us, when we're working with influencers, we have a scorecard. So we can say, hey, these are the 5 or 7 elements that are really important. And while we can still measure through analytics some ROI, a lot of it, we're not going to have attribution, as you mentioned. So, but we do know that if we get these right keywords in, and we do know that if we get a couple of great images out of it, and we do know that if, this is put into the video, on and on and on, that we could score those as an A, because more than likely they're going to have like a great result, on whatever platform they're for. So that's how we look at it. And it's more of like over time, if we're, if we use our recipe and we hit our A scorecard, we're going to have more videos or more Instagram collaborations that, end up winning for the brand.
Well, Luke, I think you're just spot on. I don't know if that's something you do, with your clients, or obviously if it's for yourself with your business there at New Era, but that's spot on. And that is, I think, the new wisdom that brand owners everywhere really need to take a look at. Nothing the matter with the traditional kind of metrics, but the idea of a scorecard or a handful of key sort of measurements that you want, or almost components actually, that you want to validate that are present in your activity is probably a wiser, sage kind of a move. I can share another, a colleague of mine, Doug Olson. I've done some work with him at Arizona State University, Thunderbird School of Global Management, and I'm at is part of also Arizona State University. But he talks a lot about how customer-generated content and custom-generated content actually leads to higher buyer intent. Now, of course, the virtue of these digital spaces and working with influencers, like you mentioned, that asset, the Instagram post or the YouTube video, those are an almost evergreen sort of component that will continue to add value. So one of the challenges with ROI, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you have a traditional campaign that maybe it was a print media campaign or a billboard. It was up for a month. It's down for a month. I can measure the ROI. But when you have these evergreen sort of assets that are out there effectively marketing for you 24/7, 365, and maybe years into the future, what he talks about is the impact of those almost customizable kind of ads, which is effectively what an influencer is doing for you. I'll explain the customizable part in just a moment. But you are getting the message sent. This company cares about me. This company is one that I want to have a strong relationship with. And so really, you could talk about a metric of return on caring or return on relationship. And what you're doing there is you're really communicating to that audience that your brand is one that is trustworthy. Your brand is one that is authentic. Your brand is one that solves a real problem by a real person that I can relate to. And that's, in fact, the customizable part. There are some new digital ways that we're, experimenting with customizable ads, but in a way, an influencer that has an audience that is clearly dedicated to them. When they are explaining how your product or service helped them, it is effectively a customizable kind of an ad. And I mean that in a very authentic, direct way. I don't think there's any sleight of hand about that when it's done legitimately, authentically, which is why it's so important. But you're actually now building on return on caring or return on relationship. That's a little bit hard for us to quantify, but you want to make sure that it's present and it's there. And that's a winning campaign.
That's a great example. And I think I just kind of piggyback on that a little bit, just from my own experiences. And especially if people listening in the audience have a lot of old school SEO, you'll all remember that, what strong SEO really is about offsite things that are happening. So it could be other people linking to you, talking about you, those types of things. It's things that you can't literally control in your own site. It's what other people are doing. And that can really send a strong signal and help your SEO. And the way I look at it, it's kind of that's what influencers are doing. I mean, a brand can sit there and talk all they want, but people trust third parties when they're talking about the brand more than they're going to trust the brand themselves. And kind of to your point, you get that benefit of other people talking about you. And often these are people that, their audiences really trust them.
Again, I think that is perfectly in line. If I were to summarize it, this is a small acronym that there's many different acronyms out there for us to remember as brand owners or marketers. But I'll offer you my 4 C's right here around influencer platforms or influencer kind of campaigns. You want to look for these 4 C's. The first is just clear. You have a clearly defined purpose as to why you want to be on that platform and who it is that you're working, with on that platform, whatever platform they're on. And many, of course, are on more than one platform. So you got to think about that very carefully. The second is clean. Is the creative appropriate for that platform? And I know that if we spent all day and they had the appropriate attention and creative to doing it, we probably won't do it as well as the influencer will themselves, because they know the platform, they know the way that the images need to be designed for that, whether it's an Instagram, a YouTube, or even a Twitter for that matter. But they know that it's clean and that the creative is appropriate for that platform. So let's cooperate with them and let them do that. The third is concise. So that there is some kind of brief but comprehensive message for whatever it is that's being utilized for. Hopefully, that when you're making some kind of a relationship with an influencer, the idea of what it is that you're doing, or the needs of the product that you can communicate are one thing, but they're going to do that for you on their behalf. In other words, it's a comprehensive solution for whatever it is, the problem that's fit for purpose. And the last is that it's captivating, that the campaign is attractive, that it's going to hold the appropriate attention. And again, I could sit with my marketing team all day long and try to figure out, do we have a campaign that's, clear, clean, concise, and captivating? Or I can go find the appropriate influencer that's actually going to do this in an innate way. Their campaign is already going to be clear, clean, concise, and captivating, because they have a vested interest in doing that in a way that when I was working with a traditional kind of agency, well, their interest is as far as, my budget is to pay them, or as good of an ad person as I can get to work with. But the influencers are right on the 4Cs, and that's their bread and butter.
That makes a ton of sense. And I love acronyms. So yeah, like you mentioned, clear, clean, concise, and captivating. I think it's a good recipe, but also, for everybody listening, just rewind and just understand, the intent behind that and why, if the influencer already has that, there's a value in that, and when you're negotiating with them, it's not just about the time that it's going to take them to throw up an Instagram post. Speaking of that, why don't we kind of get into, I'm sure people are listening and they're wondering, like, how do I find these influencers? And then obviously, you could go, brands can go search on Instagram or YouTube or whatever other platform, but they can also hire agencies. But I've often found agencies, can be really expensive. Their influencers are maybe not micro influencers, they're kind of like higher level influencers. But it'd be good to hear from you, Dr. Lynch, on if people are, want to get their hands dirty and ask their marketing departments to just go out and test this. Like, how would they actually kind of do it?
Right. This is an excellent, kind of question, and I won't have a simple answer. There's virtues on all sides, and I don't have any professional alignment with any of these platforms or marketplaces that help find influencers, but I have heard and spoken with influencers themselves, brand owners themselves that lament that kind of process. I do think that, like anything in life, there are some excellent agencies out there. There's also some excellent platforms out there. So I'll say just a few words on the virtue of that, and we'll talk about the other side of sort of going organically yourselves. When you are able to work with an agency or a platform, and there are some very good ones out there, oftentimes some of these metrics, some of these dashboards that you would otherwise need to create or be concerned about with some of the notions that we just touched on are already made for you. So the benefit of working with those agencies, if you just don't feel that you're going to have the time and staff to dedicate to that, and especially if you're talking about a typical brand, maybe working with a dozen influencers. I think I've recently read some statistics that some really small, medium-sized brands working with up to 50 influencers, that can be a lot to manage. And so the advantage of working with an agency or a platform like that is simplifying that and making sure that you're getting good metrics where it's appropriate. Now, the age-old problem, though, is whether you're working with an agency or you're going to go try to find some of these influencers are your own, is getting that match. And so let's go to the other side, because I think there's a lot of virtue on that. Simply, where your audience typically are. Hopefully, you know something about your channels. You've built personas. And so it doesn't, frankly, from my own research, talking with a lot of, especially mid-tier brands, it often is one or two people at most in these marketing departments that are actually engaged in the social media. Perhaps they've had some experience themselves being an influencer. And you really are going to start in-house trying to identify people that might be attractive to the product. Nowadays, of course, it's working both ways. There's a lot of influencers that are contacting brands and managers trying to show the engagement of their audience and the different kinds of things that they've done, because they're actually, reaching out directly for the brand. So I've seen all sides of that. The challenge there is, you still are just signing up for a lot of hands-on effort. So if you're ready for that, and I think you do need to make a dedicated focus to do that, dedicate somebody who is going to be managing that social media and probably the influencers themselves, I think that's a really viable option. And I think it gives the brands the best sort of, control to have the appropriate relationship and actually build trust with the influencers that they're working for. But again, the downside could be tracking those metrics, and it is a lot of work to manage the kinds of agreements that you have. Did the post actually happen? What kind of engagement were you looking for on that? Did it actually happen? So, you're just signing up, to manage that. And that's where specialization sometimes with an agency or a platform could save a lot of time.
I couldn't agree more. On one end, I'll be like, hey, how come, these other companies aren't doing it? But the thing is, if it's part of your company DNA and you already know how to do these things and you got like a strong marketing and SEO mindset in the team, they can fit in. You got to be really process driven. Like you said, there could be individual contracts for every one of these engagements. And, those things, if your team isn't set up that way, then it can definitely be a challenge. Maybe just even on the goal setting standpoint, like maybe the team you have can get the job done, but they need someone to kind of write out the plan for them. So there's a bunch of hurdles there. And I guess, if someone's listening and they're not sure, you got a couple things to think about, but working with an agency is going to be a lot quicker, as you mentioned. And then, and if you do it yourself, can have more long-term benefit. Like you said, the engagement, the relationship is important because one of the other metrics we track is we want to increase the number of engagements we have with each influencer, which sounds like an obvious thing, but if you don't make that a goal, then it may not happen, right? And you're just finding, new influencers all the time. But having those repeat engagements, there's a lot of value there.
Boy, it really does pay off. I mean, one of the things that I share with some of the executives that are coming to, our programs or other kinds of consulting engagements, measurement is the only true change catalyst, and attention is the only true value indicator. In other words, you have to measure something to get it done, the old adage, and then you have to make sure that engagement is there, the attention is appropriate for what you're looking for. A lot of companies, and I don't know if you've had this experience, Luke, they do look to their own employees as a potential way to get started. So if you do have some folks in your teams, and I know many are feeling that they're already chief cook and bottle washer, especially for some of these small and medium brands, but you are an excellent advocate for the products or solutions that you're making. You can be an initial influencer, and that could also be a way for you to sort of experience both sides and sort of learn the business. And I would reasonably encourage that as a start. I've talked with a lot of brands that have started that way and found out, friends and family, even, those same people that some of them might have been initial investors in the business because they believed in the product, getting initially or the old way we would say testimonials, but getting now them to post some things on social media and actually find people that it really ticks for is a reasonable strategy. Now, of course, I am aware there are other businesses out there that want to turn all your staff, into influencers. I think that opens up other challenges. Not saying that it can't happen, but not everybody is really outfitted for that. And you do need to prepare the appropriate content in the 4 C's that I just went through if you're really turning that on internally. But that should be another avenue that people kind of consider. Maybe look in the mirror, maybe look at your staff and team. Is there 1 or 2 people that are willing to do that and maybe start to share some how-tos in a reasonable, authentic way, which is so important for influencers? That could be a great avenue to actually get started. Then try it out, and then you might see the virtue of an agency or something like that after.
Yeah, I think, and that's a great way. I know we want to jump over to this other topic really quick. So I think this is a good one to kind of finish up on the influencer topic. That's a great idea. I haven't even really thought about that one, but if you have a couple of employees and, they know the space, I think the point that you made that was important was that they can kind of put the how-to together and they can get, deep and involved in the space. So I think we'll leave it off on that idea right there, because I think that gives you, everybody listening, a third idea, right? You could run and create your own program. You can find an agency, or internally, you can kind of do this test start with folks from the company. Dr. Lynch, why don't we quickly pivot, because you've done some really, really interesting research on how habits have changed during COVID. And just kind of to set the table here, I'm sure we've all read a lot of articles on this. So there has been a lot of research by a lot of people on how things have changed during COVID, but you were really specific in your research articles about how this is actually, kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity for small and mid-sized companies to gain maybe market share, or maybe just headspace in the consumer's mind as the consumer changes where and how they're doing things. Could you kind of, why don't we just start out by, if you could just summarize your findings, and I think that would be a good place.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to, talk about this. We were, like most of us, caught by surprise in early spring when it was very clear that we were hitting, lockdown, stay-at-home kind of orders. So this obviously was a terrible situation that no one would wish on the world. On the other hand, it was an amazing research opportunity. In general, we're cognitive misers. We have mental shortcuts for the way that we guide our judgments. We're basically creatures of habit when we find that some kind of routine works for us. That's the reason why a lot of certainly consumer packaged good kinds of companies, they would traditionally manage growth based on population growth within the areas that they operate. And there's not a lot of science really behind that, other than that there's more people to serve. There's more people that are going to need to wash their clothes based on who's being born. But the pandemic really shook that up, because suddenly now routines were disrupted. Products that people would ordinarily buy are not available, or they're not available in a typical kind of channel. I can't go to the store, but is it available online? That's an unprecedented opportunity to actually look at those kinds of earth-shattering events that might change buying habits. But in particular for mid-tier brands, a lot of the bigger brands and such, again, they have other avenues to kind of solve that. But when we were curious, and are people actually experiencing that? So back in March, just 2 weeks after the stay-at-home orders had hit nationally here in the U.S., we did a national survey, a representative, valid survey of adult shoppers. And we were asking them, what are the new things that they're experiencing? And perhaps, again, not to a big surprise, about 58% of those that we surveyed said, hey, they visited a store that was new to them. 76% said that they shopped online at new stores or websites, and they were shifting when they were shopping. About 80% of the customers saying that they were actually shopping at new times a day. That is a perfect formula for changing habits. And that's exactly what we found. 54% of the respondents reported buying brands that were new to them, and 30% of their shopping baskets actually contain new brands. That's incredible, and absolutely an opportunity we would have not wished on the world, but we're actually starting to see back in March the early signs that maybe something special was happening with buying patterns because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and I guess what people could take from that is, hey, we better get online, or we better, make sure that we're strong online, or advertising more, or have take it. It's kind of like just kind of a common, just like a word that we'll use around here, or any businesses, I guess, will use it, is like, if you're going to advertise in Q4, customers have their wallets out, they're spending in December and in late November versus say September, right? Just because of the holidays. And so, we've just seen higher conversion rates, and maybe that's happening right now. But is there anything specific that brands can do? I mean, beyond the obvious, maybe increase advertising, or just try to increase awareness, or just be online and be there for their customers. But is there anything that your research showed that they could change on their products, or be in a certain channel? Or just curious if there's any takeaways there.
Luke, that's exactly what our research sort of uncovered. Way more than the major market brands, much like you would imagine. It is actually the small mid-tier brands that are able to pivot. They are more agile because first of all, I think they're closer to the market, and they actually can sense and understand what the new need is, but they can actually turn on a dime. And we found that over and over across the research, and we're still going on. I'll give you one example. There's a lot of fashion companies now that were, at that time, they were maybe producing some kind of hair accessory. Immediately there was a need for masks, and people didn't just want any masks. They wanted high quality masks. They wanted masks that were maybe some kind of coordination with their outfit. Well, what better to meet that need than a small mid-tier brand that was already producing other kinds of fashion accessories, but now producing fashion accessories like, face masks. Another example would be recognizing that people's buying habits and location had changed. So way faster, way sooner than maybe some of these bigger market brands. It were the local brands that found ways to solve the last mile for digital distribution. So, hopping online with some kind of a delivery service, or even placing their products in places they would not. We featured one example. This one is actually an international example, but maybe those that have traveled a bit know that other countries utilize vending machines for products that might surprise you. But we don't see a lot of that in the U.S. We saw medium-sized brands find ways to get their products into vending machines in public places. So low touch or no touch, but it removed the need to go around other people to actually have products basically on the street corners. So in the end, we found actually that there was more evidence by the small and medium market brands that could detect sort of what the needs were and sort of change either the way that they were manufacturing things or what they were doing for actually getting to where the customers need them to be. And it was faster done, and by far, even small farmers markets, Luke, we found a lot of them adopting those kind of digital delivery models. And even services, we found a lot of evidence for those kind of dealerships offering no touch or low touch kinds of service for car repairs. So those were things that were not done at a national level, but really the local brands that were kind of scrappy and be able to pivot.
Yeah, those are great examples. Even the car one, that's a great example, because sometimes we just think about products, but all services, companies that have really adapted quickly, advertising that it's safe, advertising exactly how they're going to take care of you or your car or whatever it might be. I think they're winning. So I'm glad you brought up those different examples to kind of tell that story. Looking forward, and I guess we can kind of finish up the conversation on this question because it's always a big one, but Amazon's taking more and more share. And it seems, at least on my end, that there's more consolidation happening, right? You have Amazon, but then you have other, the Wayfairs and Walmarts and everybody else. And so the smaller brands still have that challenge that, hey, all the eyeballs are now increasingly starting on Amazon, their shopping journey. We talked about influencer marketing. I think that's a way that these small brands can stay relevant and win. Do you have any other thoughts, between our conversation today on influencers and, just on the changing consumer habits over the next couple of years? Where should brands, put their focus on so they stay relevant and continue to grow in a world where the big companies are kind of consolidating a lot of those eyeballs?
Right. A lot easier said than done. Some professor at Thunderbird is going to tell these brand owners about what to do.
That's funny.
But I don't think you're alone, actually. And I think the evidence was clear. There's a shot across the bow of even the big marketplaces like Amazon and Wayfair and such back when Nike announced in January and February that they were going off platform. Now, immediately, probably a lot of brand owners and brand teams are going to say, well, we're not Nike. We're not a gorilla ourselves. And so how do we actually do that? But I think the answer is, just as you were saying, Luke, we're actually already touching on that. I think the first strategy is, within those marketplaces, you still want to take advantage of everything you can to make sure that you're producing a collection of products. Those marketplaces were really built around web engineering, people trying to solve how do you display a virtually unlimited supply and do it efficiently. And that meant that the experience with the brand is really mitigated by that. And in our opinion, somewhat reduced. In other words, seeing just your product among a list of other products where you're pretty much competing on price is a really low competitive place to be. So to the extent that you can take advantage of those platforms first to make sure that you do have a curated store, even a link to your store or your collection of products is the first thing. Use some jujitsu, right? Marketing jujitsu. They give it to you, take advantage of that. The second part of that strategy I do think is related to what you can do after the fact, and it is going to be challenge or strategies like an influencer. But those products, once they are sent, you have a direct line to the consumer. So doing a lot more on the packaging or in the packaging to drive some kind of engagement after the fact and loyalty after the fact. So really focus on what they're going to get. I know myself, having to switch to a lot of these, I've seen a lot of media market brands have very clear packaging and very clear direction and offers for me to continue to have a relationship with them, maybe even share a promotion with a friend or gain some kind of accessory with the product if I take the step to go to their direct website off of those marketplaces. And again, I love the marketplaces. I don't want the marketplaces to get me wrong. They all serve a purpose here, but we're just talking about, having a comprehensive omni-channel strategy, and that means that take advantage of every touch point that you have, still be data-driven in your decision-making about what is appropriate of some kind of an incentive, but anything that you can do to make sure that you're driving customers either to your curated store within that marketplace, or even better, a curated store off the marketplace, which allows you to have a stronger relationship. And that's actually, I think, where the two topics dovetail, because your influencers are definitely going to be one of those avenues that can continue to drive not only actually to the marketplace, but maybe to your own branded site or some kind of a promotion or some kind of co-creation is what I would recommend with those customers. So have them post a selfie with the product, have them have some way to actually share a success story of whatever the product has done or is doing in their lives. And those strategies are far more in the hands of the medium market brands than they are the marketplaces.
Wow, that's a great answer and a great place to finish up on. And just listen, I talk to a lot of brands that aren't focused on digital. They don't even sell on their own website, and they don't even really brand on their own website. It's just like a placeholder. So, rewind that. I mean, this is the time to really double down and create that beautiful experience and figure out how to create that multi-channel experience, or omni-channel that we just talked about. So listen, I enjoyed the conversation, Dr. Lynch. Really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, and just want to thank you for coming on. How can listeners, find more about you and what you're doing?
Well, I'm available in all the regular social media places as well. I'm on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Patrick Lynches in the world. So I am Patrick Lynch, PhD. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I certainly invite that. We have actually pretty active conversations sometimes with executives there. So please look me up on LinkedIn. But I am the one Patrick Lynch with the PhD. That's the only way I can differentiate. Or if you go to Arizona State University, you're able to look up on the directory, and you can hit me up there and contact me through the university. I'm at Thunderbird School of Global Management. I'm instructing in all kinds of courses for credit, but we also do continuing education for executives and a robust set of programs there.
Awesome. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure having you here. And I just want to thank all the other listeners for joining us today on the podcast. Truly appreciate your reviews on iTunes, and hope you join us for the next interview.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to double your online sales? Check out www.retailband.com. And don't forget to join us next week with our next amazing guest.